Welcome to English Career Day. This is a collaboration between the Career Development Center and the English Department. My name is Danielle, and I'm an Associate Director in the Career Development Center. Throughout the day today, we've invited alumni to join us for conversations about their careers in order to give you insight into different career paths, industries, and to get advice on how to enter and thrive in these fields. All of the sessions will be recorded, and our guest for this session is Sean Colt. Welcome, Sean. Sure. Sean is a 2009 graduate of St. Joe's who majored in English with a focus in journalism. Sean is currently the Vice President of Public Affairs for the Philadelphia Flyers and the Wells Fargo Center. Prior to his current role, Sean held various communications roles in the U.S. Senate and on Senate campaigns throughout the country. Most recently, he was the Communications Director and Senior Advisor for United States Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. Sean started his career in Philadelphia as an associate with Keisler, hope I'm saying that right, Keisler Media and Issue Advocacy before moving to Washington, D.C. So we're very excited to hear from Sean today and welcome him back to Hawk Hill. Thank you for being with us today, Sean.
Thanks. Hopefully I can come see everyone in person sometime soon. I miss it.
All right, so I have a list of 10 questions I'm going to be asking you, and then we'll follow it up with 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A from our listeners. So audience, feel free to write your questions in the chat as you think of them, and then we'll ask Sean your questions during the Q&A at the end of the session.
Great.
So let's get started. We're going to begin with a series of career-focused questions. So Sean, could you describe within your current role the core responsibilities and what a typical day or week looks like for you?
Yeah, well, I would say certainly most days are pretty different, just kind of depending on what's going on. But really, I oversee everything sort of, public facing that comes from the Philadelphia Flyers organization or from Wells Fargo Center. So that's everything from announcements about upcoming concerts and interviews with players and coaches to announcements about our COVID protocols at the arena or things that we're doing as an organization in the community. We held a vaccination campaign sort of in the peak of COVID last year. We've been doing a lot to work with local small businesses to help them out who've been impacted by COVID. So it's a real wide range of things, everything from what's actually happening on the ice to what we're doing as a company, because obviously, yes, we're a hockey team, but we're also a company of 300-400 people and an arena that hosts all kinds of events. So everything from what goes out on our social media accounts to what we say to the media to what we communicate internally, all that stuff runs through me.
Very cool. So you have your hand in entertainment and sports.
Trying to.
So when did you know, so this question is a little bit different for you, I guess. How did you know that you wanted to make this career change, I guess? Because I know your previous career path was in politics.
Yeah.
So what made you decide that you wanted to pursue this and what led you to that decision?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I really appreciated about working in politics was on its best days, certainly not always, but on its best days, was really an opportunity to build a sense of community and, help represent and strengthen institutions like the Senate, like the U.S. Congress, and use those sort of institutions and platforms as ways to bring people together and sort of make a positive impact on the community. So, I think I certainly was not looking to get into sports by any stretch. I was much more focused on, kind of helping different organizations. Obviously, I'd only worked in politics, but figured I'd go work for a business or a university or something like that to sort of help them navigate what's going on in the world and help them sort of have, the right proactive message. But this opportunity came up in sports. Sort of ended up being a really natural fit for me. Certainly I've been a sports fan my whole life, but I think the biggest appeal to me was that, the Flyers, like any other sport, are such an important community institution that so many people look to. It has such an incredible platform. to reach so many people, to bring people together, to try and create some positive impacts in the community. So I think my sort of career in politics ended up being a pretty easy transition into this.
Yeah, I'm sure you use a lot of the same communication skills and that sort of
For
thing
sure.
too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And not
Um,
quite as well, the Flyers are not having a good year, but otherwise I was gonna say it's a little less combative, but
right.
maybe not this year.
A little bit calmer.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you say is the typical career path for an entry level associate with Comcast Spectacor or with the Flyers?
Yeah. Um, so, it certainly all depends on what department you're in. I think sort of most applicable for English majors um, would be sort of my department and probably the marketing department. And a lot of it is, sort of on the entry level is coming in and um, really just helping with all kinds of events and initiatives that we're doing. So like the junior people on my team are doing everything from really closely monitoring the media around the Flyers and the organization, but also, organizing events, taking the first draft at press materials, whether that's a press release that we're going to put out about an announcement about the team or the organization, or copy that's going to go on the website or social media, all things like that. So I think certainly writing and research and sort of like collaboration skills are really important. Being able to kind of figure out what the organization's trying to do, get the right people in the room, get the right information, and be able to sort of present it in an organized, strategic way is kind of the name of the game, certainly for more junior members of the team.
Okay, great, thanks. Is there a structured, you know, ladder as far as movement goes upwards, or like, is there a typical entry level position that a student should be looking at?
I think every business is sort of different, but we sort of call our entry level positions coordinator positions.
Okay,
So if you're sort of looking in sports, I think kind of keeping an eye out for the title of coordinator is usually sort of that those jobs for folks right out of school. And I don't think I've quite been here long enough to speak too much to sort of the sort of upward trajectory stuff, but certainly in both my experience with the Flyers and in the political world, the way to succeed and get ahead is to just be super useful and be super reliable. Be someone who your managers and sort of supervisors can really rely on to take projects, take initiatives, and really get them done on your own. So that would be sort of I think no matter what, as far as how to get somewhere and grow.
perfect. Thank you so much. What would you say you enjoy the most about what you do, and what's something that you wish you could change?
Yeah, I think the thing I enjoy the most about what we do is sort of like what I mentioned earlier. We have this incredible loyal fan base of people who we're able to reach and activate and move pretty quickly. So there's nothing more fun than when your favorite sports team is doing great and sort of cheering them on. But we're also a 365-day a year company, so I think the most fun thing is finding ways to help the organization be sort of a positive institution in the city, sort of be good corporate citizens. So a lot of the things that we do, bringing people together, I think is what's most fun. I know I mentioned it earlier, but our vaccination campaign, for example, we worked with Penn Medicine and the Black Doctors Consortium downtown, and it was just incredible to have basically Flyers vaccination clinics and bring Gritty down, bring our like dance team down, play a bunch of music, turn it into a party. We had Gritty there giving out Gritty I Took My Shot stickers. So it was just one small example, I think, of the sort of community impact that we can have based, through an organization like this with its sort of reputation in place in the city already. One thing that I could change, gosh, I don't know. We are, like I said, it's a tough season this year. The Flyers are one of the lower ranked teams in the standings, I guess is the way I'll say it. And, so I think one thing that I wish I could change is that, when the team's not doing well, it makes everything a little tougher. I sort of describe it as like the weather, like when the team's not doing well, it's sort of cloudy and rainy out. And when the team's doing well, it's like bright sunshine and you feel great and everything's kind of a little bit easier. So maybe if it wasn't quite so tied to team performance, which unfortunately I can't impact, that would probably be the one thing I would see if I could change.
Yeah, no control over that.
Yeah, I'm not picking the lines and making trades.
All right, thanks. What would you say has surprised you the most about your career?
I think sort of the unpredictability of it. Certainly going back to politics, I got a great internship with Larry Seisler, who you mentioned earlier, who's sort of a political consultant here in town. And I'm from the Washington area, so sort of had a vague interest in going down and working on the Hill. But as soon as I decided I wanted to do it, I certainly went all in and really committed myself to making it happen. And there's just no way to predict, especially in an industry like that, that's so based on connections and kind of luck, frankly, where I'd end up. And I think looking back, I think the best thing that I did and that I would certainly advise, students who are interested in careers like that is, to show up and just be ready for whatever opportunities come. I think it's really challenging in certain industries that are less predictable. Like I think about, sort of consulting, you go to work for Deloitte or one of those big firms, and it's pretty obvious how, after 1 year you do this, after 2 years you do that. I think, certainly careers like in politics or even in communications and other firm, sort of industries like that can be much less predictable. So I think really having, you got to be comfortable with, not being totally sure what you're going to be doing next, and really having a sense for keeping an eye out for opportunities and making sure you're sort of always ready to take advantage of them.
That's great advice. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to focus on actions students need to take. So just a quick reminder to everybody listening, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll address them in a little while during the Q&A session. So Sean, I'm going to ask you about internships in a minute, but for now, what 2 to 3 experiences would you suggest students engage in while in college to help prepare them for entering the field of public affairs or politics even upon graduation?
Yeah, I would say, you always hear, especially as sort of an English major, that it's like really important, like your writing skills are really important. And I think that's true. I think one of the things that is sort of the caveat or sort of next step that I would take there is it's sort of practical writing. So like, for example, when I'm looking to hire a junior person for my team, I'm not really interested in reading like a 10-page term paper or like, like literature analysis or something like that. I think certainly something I learned, I see Dr. Spinner there mentioning the Hawk. I worked for the Hawk newspaper when I was on campus. And I think is sort of turning your writing skills or sort of applying your writing skills into very practical sort of projects and results. So, for example, junior members of my team are like constantly writing to media or writing to our fans or, putting together copy that's really speaking for the university. And I think one of the things that I learned working on the student newspaper, excuse me, and then, that really carried over was, using those writing skills for whether it's an elected official or a business or an organization, and appreciating how important it is to write well and write accurately and write succinctly. So I think any examples that students can either make sure they have or try and get of, I'm not just a good writer, or, I like understood this historical event and broke it down effectively in a paper. It's much more like, how have you ever used your writing skills to, to get something done for a business or an organization or a newspaper or whatever. So I think, especially in public affairs and political stuff, they don't want to know just that you're a good writer, but how is your writing skill going to help them move their business or company forward?
Okay, awesome. Can you talk a little bit about how you got your first job or internship?
Yeah, I did a semester down in DC, actually, sort of like a study abroad, but in Washington, down at Georgetown, that was sort of political focused. And one of the biggest things I think I learned, and something that is sort of like a skill set of its own in Washington, is just sort of understanding and appreciating the importance of networking, especially in fields like journalism or communications or public affairs that are, like I said, sort of a little less structured sometimes. So I really sort of leaned in and learned how to meet people, and make meaningful kind of professional connections in DC, which is sort of like the name of the game down there. Ended up getting connected back with Larry Seisler, who I ended up working for here in Philadelphia, and interned for him when I was at St. Joe's my second semester junior year, and then both semesters my senior year. Then ended up working for him, and then sort of the whole reason I ended up down on Capitol Hill was he, really helped connect me with local members of Congress and sort of folks from the local kind of Philadelphia political scene. So, I would say, internships and jobs are tough to come by, and so much of it, at least in my experience, was based on really going out and making personal relationships and finding people who you found interesting, whose careers you wanted to, sort of emulate or kind of get into that industry, and go show up and introduce yourself and stay in touch and be on the lookout for opportunities. And I think that was certainly my experience.
Thank you for stressing that. Networking really is so important, and we try to teach that here too. It's how most people get their jobs.
Yeah, I remember our commencement speaker was weirdly Chris Matthews from MSNBC, which is
okay,
even more loaded now to look back on. But and I remember his commencement speech, which I don't think he had planned at all. He at the end of it, he was talking about how he got to work in Washington, and he talked about just going and knocking on every door in Congress. And he's like, I literally knocked on every door and like sort of turned to my resume. And I remember kind of taking that to heart and thinking that was really good advice, actually, of, so much of it is showing up and going out and kind of seeking the opportunities that you want. So I
not being afraid.
Surprised I remember that.
There. Yeah.
I did. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Interviewing. Can you share one or two interview tips, either from your perspective, from lessons you've learned, or from what you think someone at your organization who's recruiting might be looking for?
Yeah. I would say once you get to the interview stage, I think I'm always sort of looking for someone who's taking it really seriously and who's prepared for it. So we happen to have an intern on my team who has an interview today, and I was sort of chatting with her about it yesterday to prep for it. I think one of the things that you can't stress enough is if you're going to interview somewhere, you should know as much as you possibly can about the person and the place where you're interviewing. you should come in engaged and ready to talk about that organization, that business, the things that you can see that they've been doing, whether it's from their website or from media coverage or from whatever else. And you should also have thoughtful questions about how you might fit in there, what direction they're trying to take, that sort of stuff. I'd also say, again, I think this sort of gets back a little bit to how to show kind of show off your writing skills. If you're interviewing, they've seen your resume, they know what's on your resume. I think what I always kind of try to give advice to do is have one or two or even three examples of something relevant that you've worked on that would make you a good fit at that job. So, for example, like even if it's from school, I'd probably ideally it's from more of an internship type of situation, but even if it's from school, a challenge that you kind of had to overcome. Maybe you're working on a group project and someone wasn't carrying their weight, so you had to figure out this new thing, or you had to, juggle what you were doing sort of academically with things that you were doing on campus or internships that you were doing sort of away from school. So I would say one, take seriously the place where you're interviewing and the person you're interviewing with, and two, have concrete examples that aren't on your resume of things that you can point to that sort of show why you'd be valuable.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Shifting gears a little bit. So at SJU, your education here included the keystones of social justice and ethics. How would you say that this has impacted how you work and the career decisions you've made to date?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I appreciate so much about sort of a Jesuit education specifically is just the sort of holistic approach that the Jesuits take to looking at the world around us and our communities that we're in, and having a sense of how interconnected all of that is. I think certainly politics is probably like the best possible example of sort of a field to apply that in, but I think it ends up being relevant, in my current job too. I think, I have always been sort of a newspaper dork, and always I grew up in DC, so I read the Washington Post cover to cover every day. And I think, in addition to having good writing skills, I think having appreciation for the world around you, no matter what you're going to do professionally, is just so important. I mean, just in the city of Philadelphia, I find just making sure to stay up on what's happening in the Inquirer or on the news locally here is such important context for me as I'm working for an organization that's based here in Philadelphia. What's going on with the schools, what's going on with COVID protocol, what's going on at city council. Whether you're working for an accounting firm or a hockey team, there's going to be some sort of nexus to that. And I think English majors in particular are apt to sort of be on top of that and understand how some of those things apply. So I think, again, maybe if you're an accounting major and you're going to go work in an accounting firm, you can kind of just live in your Excel sheet. But I think certainly for English majors, one of the things that I have found both important and just sort of kind of rewarding and fulfilling is having a real appreciation for what's going on in the world around you, and being able to apply that, or at the very least sort of have a sense of it. And that's, I think, so rooted in sort of the Jesuit approach. So that's the way I think about it.
Yeah, and you kind of spoke about before, taking that information and then trying to have a positive impact on the community. And I think that goes back to a lot of the St. Joe's values too.
Yep.
All right. So last question related to internships and that sort of thing. What types of internships should students try to secure to prepare for a role like yours or in your industry?
Yeah, I would say a couple different things. I mean, obviously there are organizations like ours, sort of, there's sports teams. Everyone knows who the sports teams are, but I would say that there are so many organizations, perhaps more than you might even think, that do really important and helpful public affairs work. I mean, I think first of all, there are a lot of firms in town. Obviously, Seisler, where I work, but there's Divine and Partners. There's Bryan Communications. There's I think Tierney Communications, a separate one. So there are a lot of sort of public affairs firms that do this work, sort of on behalf of organizations and clients. So I would definitely encourage folks to kind of poke around and learn about what some of those firms are around town. It always sounds cheesy, but it's true. And I feel like so many people have done this, like make an Excel sheet of like the different organizations, like Google around, like search around, make an Excel sheet of the places that look interesting. I'd also say, any business that is, of significant size is going to have, sort of community relations and communications departments. So whether that's Comcast, whether that's Blue Cross, all the sort of the big companies in town, have departments that do this kind of stuff. So I think that's another place to look. And then, I think, again, sort of getting back to the concept of sort of community institutions. I think we just hired someone on our community relations team from the Special Olympics. I was interviewing a couple people for a job. One of them worked at the Mann Center or the Philadelphia Opera or the Art Museum. There are lots of different sort of cultural institutions that, I think more and more want to have folks who can help them sort of navigate the public affairs space and sort of the world around us. So I would say, don't just limit yourself. There are firms, there are nonprofits, there are, businesses that are doing all these things. And I think it's frankly kind of a growing field. I mean, I think everyone can see in the last 5-10 years, so much more is expected, frankly, from companies and organizations and even sports teams as far as their engagement in the community and sort of societal issues. So there's need for that for sure.
Absolutely. All right. So as we come to a close, I just have 2 final questions. What is something that you wish someone told you when you were in school? That's the first one.
Yeah. I think I did it without having been told, and not from my own just sort of like lucked into it. But I really think your experience at St. Joe's is a springboard. It is not, if you're not leaving campus and you're just focusing on your coursework and that's sort of it, that's not enough. And I think it doesn't, I think St. Joe's has so much more to offer than that. And so I would really encourage folks to not just say, okay, I mean, you can get straight A's, but if you don't have any internships or experience on your resume, it's not going to be as impressive as someone with, maybe not the same GPA, but who's done a lot more things. So I know that's not a good answer, but that's probably the best one I can come up with right now.
No, that makes sense. And then second, what's a piece of advice you would give to students who are interested in this career path?
Again, I would say, like, you really have to put yourself out there. And you really have to go out and seek opportunities and sort of find your way into different sort of industries and fields and organizations, and that seems daunting, but like I promise it's not. And like, people I've found as a rule want to help and want to and frankly respond well to people who are interested and engaged and asking questions and trying to learn and trying to get involved. And I think, it can be weird, especially, 20, 21 years old, just sort of showing up and talking to some person whose, career you find interesting. But believe me, they want to talk to you. They they want to help, and they were in your shoes too. So, I would say, what I've always found is that people are incredibly generous. And if you show up with good intentions and like wanting to learn and wanting to get involved, people are attracted to that, and people want, those kind of people around. So I think especially again, if you're an English major and you don't have, you're not like an accounting major who's going to go work in an accounting firm or something very, sort of straightforward like that. You have to kind of go find your own kind of path a little bit. And again, it's a little scary. It can be a little daunting, but it's also much more exciting and not as hard as it seems if you just kind of lean into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sean.
Yeah, thank you.
We're going to transition now to the Q&A part of the session. So I do see a question in the chat box. And just a reminder, if anybody else has questions, drop them in there. Or if you would like to ask a question directly, just raise your hand and I will call on you after I address the questions in the chat. So Sean, Aaron wants to know, do you have any advice for students with experience in journalism looking to work in sports?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of depends on what side of the coin. Like if you're hoping to get into sports journalism, I haven't quite done that myself. Certainly, I work with, sports journalists every day. I would say, if you want to get on the journalism side, you need to have clips. You need to be able to show your writing to whether it's the Inquirer or one of the TV stations or whoever else. You need to have good examples of your sports writing, frankly, that you can show them and kind of show that this is what you could bring to their outlet or their publication. On the sports side, like on the team side or the industry side, I would say, one, clips are also really important. If sort of journalism has been your focus, I mean, I think having some of those things as sort of examples of your writing are really important. And I think second is sort of have an understanding of what the team, how the team approaches communications and sort of thinking about that. So, be able to, have thoughtful questions and have sort of done your research on, hey, I noticed the franchise, handled this situation this way, and, kind of having an appreciation for sort of put yourself in the team's shoes. As far as sort of more practical, just reaching out, I mean, I think reach out to people like me, people like me at the Eagles, Sixers, Phillies, Union, whatever. Sports is another sort of like tough industry to crack into. But you've got to cast a wide net, and we have lots of folks who work with us who started at the Eagles, or we have folks who left our organization to go work for the Phillies, whatever. It's very much sort of a close knit industry where folks know each other. I would also say, again, to get back to what I mentioned earlier, I ended up in sports. I had no plans of working in sports, and I spent 10 years not working in sports and sort of just stumbled upon here. So I would also say that, if you want to do something sort of like me, sort of a communications type job within the sports industry, you don't necessarily have to start in the sports industry. I just hired someone yesterday who also worked in politics, and maybe that's my bias. And I hired a Republican, so I felt very proud of myself for being bipartisan. But if you're doing communications work for another company or for another organization, that's applicable to sports. I interviewed someone who we really, really liked for this job. One was at a firm downtown, and another worked for Wawa's corporate communications, you know. So I think don't get too, if you want to like do communications work and you want to be in sports, don't, it's not be all end all to like get your first job down at the stadium complex. Like it could be, I interviewed someone like a year ago who again worked at the opera downtown and would have been a great fit for us. So it's not, it's more about building up your communication skills and less industry focused, I found. And I mean, I literally worked in another industry for 10 years and then just jumped over. So I think that's sort of another good example of, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be quite so so specific industry wise.
Yeah, that's so true. Thank you, Sean. That was a great answer. Anybody else have any questions? Anything? If not, thank you so much for joining
Of course.
us today. And please join me in thanking Sean for providing such great insight into his career. Sean, we're grateful for your time, and we hope to see you back here soon.
Absolutely.
And everybody, just a reminder that we recorded this session and we'll be recording all of the sessions that take place today, and they'll be available on YouTube in about a week. So thank you for joining us and have a great day.